workers in Townsville. Labor has been calling on the government for them to access the Fair Entitlements Guarantee for 3 months. Bill Shorten wrote to the Prime Minister in January, wrote again to him in March, calling upon him to allow these workers access to the Fair Entitlements Guarantee while the government deals with the situation with that corporation. Now, we ultimately want to see the government pursue that company and indeed anyone who is liable for the liquidation of that company if that's to happen. And we do believe and we support the government in pursuing others for the money that might be owed to the Commonwealth. But we've been calling now for 3 months for the government to allow these 800 workers and their families some relief. Now, unlike Minister Cash, I met with these workers in January and I met with them last week. It was interesting that last night, the Minister for Employment flew into Townsville, met with the member for Herbert, Ewan Jones, but did not meet with one worker. The press conference held today by the Minister, there was not one worker in sight, and the reason for that is because they know that this government has been sitting on their hands, not providing any relief for these workers. And I can assure you these are distressed people who don't deserve this and have had a government do nothing until Labor demanded something happen, and in the media quite rightly showed a significant interest, and it's only after that we've seen any action by the government. I have to say it was quite pathetic to see the member for Herbert, Ewan Jones, cry crocodile tears today, because Ewan Jones, along with Malcolm Turnbull and Senator Cash, voted to cut the Fair Entitlements Guarantee down to 16 weeks. There are long-serving employees in this company. They'll be getting in excess of 100 weeks of entitlements pursuant to their redundancy packages. And yet, if Senator Cash had her way, if Malcolm Turnbull had his way, and if the member for Herbert, the one who was supposedly crying over these workers today, had his way, the maximum amount that these workers and their families would receive would be 16 weeks. So they were seeking to rip off QI workers by abolishing the Fair Entitlement Guarantee. Indeed, the amendments to that are still sitting in the Senate. There is a Fair Entitlements Guarantee Act, Bill 2014, that still sits in the Senate. The government still supports cutting the Fair Entitlement Guarantee. So what we say is this: we welcome at last the government responding to Labor's demands they do something. I have to say, we also want to make it very clear that Senator Cash and the Prime Minister and Ewan Jones voted to cut these workers' entitlements by amending drastically the Fair Entitlement Guarantee. And we call now on the government, the Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull, the Minister for Employment Senator Cash, and the member for Herbert, Ewan Jones, to change their position, to reverse their decision in cutting the Fair Entitlements Guarantee and supporting that current arrangement. Because at the moment, if they get their way, workers who might lose their jobs at Arium Steel or any other workplace where a company's gone into liquidation, they will receive very little of what might be owed to them because of this government's callous disregard for workers and their family. And I'm happy to take questions. Yes, I do welcome this, but let's understand this. If it hadn't been for Labor and the crossbenchers, the only offer they'd be making to those workers today would be 16 weeks. And some of these workers are owed 2 years entitlements, 16 weeks. They've been waiting that long, some of them, 237 of which have been sacked since January. So they've been waiting. They can't get unemployment benefits. They're waiting for their entitlements. If Senator Cash had her way, there'd be 16 weeks maximum provided to these workers and their families. And further to that, this is not just a historical point I'm making. Sitting in the Senate now, there's a Fair Entitlements Guarantee bill that, if the government has its way, will cut the entitlements not just for QI workers but for all workers whose company might go into liquidation. And so the government must come out now and explain whether in fact they're willing to provide a commitment to ensure the Fair Entitlements Guarantee remains. Until they've received the money in their bank accounts, I have no confidence in this government. There's been a doorstop today. There was a stunt by the minister who flew into Townsville, did not meet one worker. Have a look at the press conference. Not a worker in sight. Ewan Jones crying crocodile tears. It was quite pathetic. Ewan Jones hasn't been speaking to these workers. Instead, he voted to cut their entitlements under law. I mean, what he has to explain, if he wants to remain to be member for Herbert, to look after the people of Townsville, he has to explain why he wanted to cut the entitlements of these workers and other workers across the country. He needs to explain that. Instead of pretending, instead of actually crying crocodile tears, this sort of concern he has, I think he has concern for one job. That's his own job. And it's only because of the effort by media to make this very, very clear that the government was sitting on its hands, was willing to cut the entitlements, that we've seen any action by the government. So no, I'm not 100% sure. Until I see those workers receive that money, I have to say I have no confidence in Malcolm Turnbull or Minister Cash. Well, that's why we need to pursue the debtors. That's why, of course, what needs to happen is we put in place a capacity to pursue those who might be responsible for this action. But this has happened through no fault of those workers. It's not the workers' fault that this has happened. So, of course, we'd expect the Commonwealth, and we would agree with the government, that they must pursue all of the assets and all of the...
And that was the Shadow Employment Minister, Brendan O'Connor, speaking there. You can press red to keep